Hello, my lovelies. I'm Ginny O, the author with no last name, and today we're going to continue our talk about building a world culture. So last time we talked about our shared history, our shared traditions, and our shared food. And today we're going to continue working down this list I made on Reddit in response to somebody critiquing a video game on how even though the video game used to feel like it had some Scandinavian culture, it no longer feels quite like it has the Scandinavian culture in it. So my my list is not in any kind of particular order, but I'm going to try, as I'm talking about elements of a world, of a culture, I'm going to try to use American culture references because we do kind of have a culture here, even if we don't think about it. I'm a lot like there are things that we have created as Americans that most people don't realize are American because we just kind of we're so steeped in it, like NASCAR and the American school bus and motorcycle clubs. Most people don't know that motorcycle clubs are kind of an American invention, and motorcycle gangs are criminal export. Scary enough. But here we are. Yes. So today I really want to talk more about architecture, the arts, traditional culture and dress, and this is going to include colors of houses. So hopefully we'll get through all of that, and then we'll see. We'll talk a little bit more, maybe about some other things. We'll see how far we get today. I usually don't have plans for these. I just keep talking, and then when we hit about 20 minutes or so, I hit end. Do you really want me to sit here and talk at you for over an hour straight? I know some people enjoy it, but I try to keep these in 20-minute bites. So here's last time video's post-it note on our shared history, traditions, and food. So today we are going to start with art. Okay, art. All right. So let's start with art. Culture. What we talk about is culture, what art. So art really covers quite a bit. All right, so we have painting is art, photography is art, music is art, sculpture is art. So art covers quite a bit of what's going on, in your culture. So what are the art, the cultural things that are going on in your art? Now in America, because we are 20, I did this recently. We are over 2,000 miles wide and we're a little over 2,000 miles tall. We're like this massive rectangle, and then we have Alaska, which is actually huge. Alaska is huge. It's like you could put it in the middle of our country, and it's bigger than Texas, and it's got several other states with it. And then we have hanging out way out in the middle of the ocean, we have Hawaii. So our art traditions are very varied here in the United States, and a lot of it depends. Again, are we talking about indigenous art, which is going to include things like porcupine needle jewelry, turquoise jewelry, dream catchers are indigenous art. The weaving, certain geometric weaving patterns are indigenous art. And there is at least one tribe, the Cherokee, who has trademarked their indigenous patterns so that you, as non-indigenous people, cannot use them and make money off of them, because that takes away from the money of the tribe. And because those patterns actually have spiritual and religious significance to them. So totally understandable. Totem poles, depending on which tribe you're talking about, they will have totem poles, and those are indigenous art. So you have that art tradition there, which is what did they have available locally? What were they using? You know, what dyes were they using? What weaving techniques were they using? And what materials were they using that is local to the area. So if you're Australian, opals are going to be something that is local to your area. If you are in upstate New York, you might have some garnets, so that they're very hard to find. Good big ones are harder to find in upstate New York. We have something that is called the Herkimer diamond, and it's not a diamond, it's just a very, very clear piece of quartz, and they're in eastern upstate New York, at around the area of Herkimer, which, you know, the indigenous people might have another name for them, but I don't know what it is, and if they do or not. So in America, a lot of our art in art culture is something, you know, that was brought over from Europe. You know, as we immigrated over here, a lot of what our art came with us. So a lot of art and art techniques are, you know, we have, yes, we had the very, you know, the Louis Comfort Tiffany company, but, you know, stained glass is, you know, European. But we have, you know, pioneered over here in America, we have pioneered different, you know, things in photography techniques that take place in the darkroom. There are some very famous American photographers. We have pioneered, some people might not think it's art, but in America we have pioneered the art of graffiti. Graffiti was very much, I mean, you can find graffiti in Pompeii, the type of graffiti in Pompeii. I'm talking about the muralistic type of graffiti with spray paint. I'm talking about that specifically, you know, coming out of, I believe, the African American traditions. There was this murals with spray paint, which kind of, some of it started out as gang tagging, some of it didn't, you know. But the art of graffiti, the art of spray paint paintings, particularly murals on walls, but it has evolved to, I have a canvas in my apartment here that is spray painting. It's an ocean scene. It's all done through spray paint. But your art, so your paintings, so your sculptures type of thing, what is indigenous to your area that you're carving out of, what type of clay. We have orangey clay and we have red clay here in America. We have, so like say if you're in Europe and, you know, some places you can't get soapstone, I think, but it's going to really depend on where you are, what type of materials that you can get to work with. Okay, so art and sculpture, weaving, what type of weaving are you doing? In America, we had some traditions in America that, you know, that we're kind of losing. So there was this one tradition in the Midwest of you pulled weft, or yeah, pull, not wefts, the pull, the warp, no, yes, the weft. So you would pull parts of the weft out of the fabric to make kind of a lace pattern. It wasn't technically eyelets or actual bobbin lace, but it was, you were thread pulling to create a pattern in the fabric. We also had this thing called tambour hooking, which became popular because of theater work, and it's it's a method of beading where you're not doing individual beads. You are using a hook to hook the thread through the beads, and it's a lot faster than doing each individual bead by hand, and you have it on a frame. And when I went to New York City in college, we visited a costume shop, and they were talking about how tambour hooking was being lost. Now, okay, my phone's in the other room, but now that everybody has a camera in their pocket, it's, maybe we don't have to lose things. We can all take photographs and we can all take video of it, type of things like that. The other major part of art is music. So what type of music does your culture that you're building have? So in America, we have actually kind of come up with quite a bit of different types of music. A lot of it either out of the folk tradition or the African American tradition. So you had ragtime, it's out of the African American tradition. Jazz is out of the African American tradition. Bluegrass was a kind of a combination of the African American tradition and the folk tradition. And bluegrass had its own musical instrument called the banjo. Of all things that America had to invent, we invented the banjo. Oh boy. And and then we also helped pioneer rock and roll, and eventually this kind of turned into hip hop. It's also American music, and I'm not sure if I would call rap American music, because that could come from some European traditions as well, but it's hip hop, maybe elements of rap, and and it's actually in the name, country western. So we have a lot of these kind of traditions in America, of music traditions that come out of different areas, whether it's coming out of Detroit, or it's coming out of New Orleans, or it's coming out of Appalachia. Um, what type of music does your culture have, and where did it come from? Who invented it? What type of instruments does it use? For instance, in China, they have a very Chinese instrument called the zither that is not very, popular in other cultures' music. It's very a Chinese instrument. And in America, we also have this instrument called the dulcimer, which is kind of similar to the zither, in that they're both kind of horizontal flat instruments that you're plucking and moving up back and forth, moving something back and forth on it to create the different tones. But the dulcimer was kind of created in Appalachia, I believe. And then kind of the dulcimer and the guitar merged together to create the steel guitar, which the git steel, and or what it could be called the dobro, which is also very popular in some country western and in some bluegrass music, the dobro. I grew up listening to bluegrass. I know a little bit more about it than I really ever wanted. So think about your music and your musical instruments, and who invented these musical instruments, and how are they used in your culture. For instance, marching band culture has a lot of woodwinds and brass, and everybody's marching in formation, and there's drums and cymbals, and so that's could be a very interesting kind of cultural thing. Where did this come from, and how did it happen, and what type of music are you using in your marching band culture, which is usually a lot of orchestral music, or a lot of what they call circus screamer music, which was this type of music made for circus acts that was kind of, it was very lively, up-tempo type of music to make people excited as the, you know, the different acrobatic acts and animal acts were going, so that people emotions and pulse would be at a certain speed to have them feel this wonder and awe about the, you know, the acts in front of them, the contortionists and things. So the next thing that's kind of adjacent to art is architecture. Architecture. And I've probably spelled that wrong. But, you know, this is a live show, so it's a recorded show, but, you know, this is what you get. So art and now architecture. So what do your buildings look like? And in America, you know, if you're not talking about indigenous buildings, which they lived in, they had several different types of buildings, depending on what culture, you know, it could be adobe buildings or, yes, teepees, but it was very, teepee tents, but it was very, very specific cultures who used that. And we had a lot of like bark log cultures, bark log houses type of things that they used as well. But that would be the indigenous. They were living a lot closer to the land than most European settlers were. But once the European settlers came over, they brought their architecture over with them, and they had to change it to fit the environment. So in America, we had what is called Dutch colonial. It's all in the name. It came from the Netherlands. It's that kind of what you consider the barn shape, the classic American barn shape. With it's kind of got like this pentagon on the top before it forms the walls. So that is considered Dutch colonial. We also had what we called the Federalist type of building. It was a very rectangular building, and it would be called something else in America, in Europe, which would probably be called Georgian in Europe. And but it was just very square and very sparse with like windows and things in it. And it usually has two, if it's up north, it was kind of made of wood, and then it would have one wall of stone that would have the chimney in it, or you would have two walls of stone in the chimney. Or if you were very rich, you would make it out of olive stone. But if you were in the south, you would have it made of brick, and it would have one, you know, one wall that was the chimney, because, you know, the south is a lot warmer than the north, so you only needed one chimney versus two chimneys. Or you would have this kind of log cabin where you would build kind of you would either put the chimney on one wall, or you would put it in the middle of the house, because you would want to have a living room on one side and a kitchen on the other, which is, of course, kind of bringing stuff over from medieval Europe and how they built houses during medieval Europe. You know, when you wanted your fireplace in the middle because, you know, you wanted some place to live on one side, and then you were using the same fireplace on the other side to cook your food. I mean, you might be making Welsh rarebit in the living room, you know, making your toast and stuff and grilling it with your cheese on it, but you wouldn't want, you know, you wouldn't be wanting to go over into the kitchen and take up space in the kitchen when you're just making yourself a snack type of thing. So, me growing up in a house that was built in the 1850s and going over to my grandparents' house, I go to these like historical reenactment houses, and it's just like, oh, so I'm just here at my grandparents again. Okay, I recognize all these artifacts. You know, this is very familiar. And then we also started creating, you know, we made the Greek revival type of house over here. And then as we've started moving out west, we created this thing called the stick Gothic house, which is it's a house made out, you know, it's a stud house with clapboard on it, and then it would have kind of like this gable in the front, and then it would have a little bit of Victorian gingerbread work type to it, and it was just called stick Gothic. And in some cases you could actually buy, you know, all the materials to a plan from Sears and Roebuck, and they would put it on a train, and they would literally ship it out to you. So, or, as it just depends on your, where you are in your country, of what type of architecture styles you have, and what's your weather, and your colors of your house are also going to depend on where you are. So in certain areas of the country, you're going to see a lot of slaty blue, or a lot of slaty green, white with red shutters, that type of thing. That's going to be one area of the country. And in other areas of the country, you're going to see, coral, and like lemony warm, or a sunny lemony almost yellow, or aqua, or a Han blue. Now we call it Han blue, but it's a very, because we saw it in Han Chinese pottery porcelain, so we named it Han blue after that. But it's like this very bright blue. So your architecture styles, and your colors of your houses, of your architecture styles, are really going to depend on what type of materials do you have available. I mean, you didn't really have bricks available in the north for, they all had to be shipped up from someplace else. So if you had a brick house, you were really, really rich. Or a stone house, you were really, really rich, because all that had to be mined from quarries and sent other places, and it's all heavy. Or it's going to depend a lot on your weather, like the size of your windows. Do you have air conditioning or not? Or in the south, there's verandas, so you can sit out on your veranda and catch the breeze. And in the southwest, you had these stucco buildings, because these adobe stucco buildings, because they had thick walls, and it would keep, absorb the heat during the day and then release it at night, so you would be cool during the day and then be warm at night, because that's just the way thermodynamics works. Science. So in your art and your architecture, what type of land are you making, what's available to the land, and what is the weather like, is going to really determine how your buildings are made, and how long are they gonna, withstand the test of time. Like a frame timber building in a very marshy area is just gonna fall apart, because it's just gonna be too humid and too wet for that kind of stucco mud daubing to actually survive. So yes, like in America, we did have those type of timber frame houses. Most of them have not survived because they were in too humid, marshy of an area, and they were replaced by brick houses, or fully wood houses. Okay, and I want to talk about one more thing real quick. I think, okay, so we're not going to get to traditional culture and dress. I should have known that. But so regional weather. So your regional weather is also, not only going to determine what your house looks like and what it's made out of, it's going to determine, what plants are in the area, and what type of, animals you have in the area, your flora and your fauna, and, what type of hazards, what type of weather hazards are you going to be dealing with? Now in America, we have a lot of weather hazards. So whether you're in the Midwest and you're dealing with tornadoes, or if you're in the South and you're dealing with the deep South and you're dealing with hurricanes, or if you're in the Northeast and the Northwest, or in the Mid-North, you're dealing with blizzards. This is going to determine, again, how your houses are built, and what type of flowers are available in your house, and they're going to show up in your art. What type of animals are in your area, and that's going to probably show up in your art. Like in upstate New York, we have loons. Down here in the Finger Lakes, we don't have loons. There's just like this really weird line, In upstate New York, you have black bears. In lower New York, you have brown bears. There's like this we're kind of in this area where you're at this kind of latitude line where the moose do not come further down. they are kind of moving a little further down, but you know, you're gonna have a lot of deer, but you're not gonna, and we used to have a lot of bison and buffalo, but we don't have that anymore. If you go out further west and you're kind of up in this kind of the same latitude, you're gonna have a lot of buffalo, and you're gonna have a lot of what are our term type of gazelle. You're gonna have the not gophers. We have groundhogs. They have something else. They're a little smaller. You know, if you go into the Midwest, you will see armadillos, and you're going to see roadrunners, and you're gonna be like, I just thought that was a cartoon thing. No, it's actually real. You know, so each area is going to tell you, gonna have different flora and fauna, except for the whole wild pig things, because pigs go wild so easily, so they're not like everywhere. And very, very like detrimental to forests and stuff like that. So, you know, depending on where you go, you're gonna have, you know, brown bears here, black bears there, grizzly bears over there. Yes, brown bears and grizzly bears are not technically the same thing. On the East Coast, you're gonna have red wolves. In the middle and the Northwest, you're gonna have gray wolves. You're gonna have Mexican wolves in the Southwest. Red wolves are actually kind of a southeast thing too, so like the Midwest, you know, are like no wolves there anymore, but everything is going to depend on your weather and where you are geographically. So, you know, think about that when you're building your world. What type of, you know, ecosystem have you created? And this is going to, you know, determine your weather. You know, are they going to be building a tornado? Are they going to be building a cellar to hide from tornadoes from? Or are they going to try to build their building to be so sturdy that it can withstand tornadoes? And that's going to determine your architecture, you know, how is that made? And, you know, and your art, what's available, what type of motifs are going to show up in your art from the flora, from your flowers and your plants and things like that. So today, so art, architecture, and your weather, that's going to also influence your culture. So your art, your music, your sculptures, your paintings, your photography, your weaving, your architecture here, your buildings and your building styles and what they're made out of and how long will they last, and your weather. And this is all influenced by your geographical location, which is, you know, do you have hurricanes? Do you have blizzards? Do you have tornadoes? Do you have earthquakes? And, you know, what type of plants and animals are in the area? Where do they live? And what do they look like? And how do they go north? Do they migrate? Do they go north and south? So do you have, you know, geese one part of the year and then they go someplace else the rest of the year? You know, your birds migration, your butterflies and things like that. Do your bears go to sleep type of thing? All right, so that's gonna all take part of your building your culture, and how do your people react to all of that. All right, so I guess we're gonna have to do another video. Take care of yourselves, my lovelies. Bless, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.